All right, you're there. All right, let's make sure. Yep, we're there. We're good. All right, so when you're ready, and you can just roll right into it and go to town. It's in.
Were you gonna do something or
No, we're just good. You can just jump in
okay?
and just say hey and hi.
Hey guys, Chris
Mhm.
with Frank.
I'm here.
Hi. We had this question and thought it would be fun to have a conversation and discussion about it rather than there aren't really any conclusions, but we've talked about it and pre-invested in a little stuff to have the conversation. Um, in addition, there's some diagrams out there from prior discussions that had to do with positional shooting and trying to be consistent in positions, cross positions, so that your point of aim, point of impact maintained that repeatability that we look for in rifle shooting. So we thought, shit, it'll be fun to get on live. I have a lot of conversation with people. So if you're watching, please ask questions, make comments, because we're not here to tell you anything, but we're kind of trying to lead this discussion and see if we can get to some type of conclusions. So the background is a picture that I put out. I don't know when the fuck that was, like a year ago.
Yeah, probably.
Common shootra. And what I did is I drew a head and torso standing up to prone and the arc that it passes. Can I see this sheet?
Yeah, I'll bring it in a little bit.
And so all I've done is draw, a head and a torso, as much as my artistic ability um, can allow, and then started to lean that head and angle down to prone. And obviously, we don't stand perfectly straight up when we're shooting standing, and we don't lay perfectly flat on the ground when we're prone. And in Frank and Mark's introductory class, Frank does a lesson with the kid watching TV with their head in their hands. And so what we did here is try to replicate that angle and then kneeling, seated, kneeling, positional stuff, which tends to fall into this section of an arc. And this arc is convenient because you may have seen the cosine relationship of wind angle. Well, the cosine relationship, which this
Here's a
allows
darker
for,
pen.
is we could apply the same thing. The discussion came back to body angle and issues in repeatability. And what we've seen is there are some shooters that when they get prone, have a different point of aim, point of impact than all of their other positions. And at first, it's easy to say, well, I've got a positional shift in my other positions. But when we check the zero, if it's set for the positions, the point of impact shift is coming from their prone shots. And that's because a lot of those shooters have low scope rings, low bipod, and a big body, and they're mashing themselves down onto the rifle. And they've been taught that you got to rest your head down like you were going to sleep on the cheek piece and put all the weight of your head on the cheek piece. And the combination of doing that, just putting it on a bag, puts downward force on the back of the rifle. And when it shoots, the recoil causes that material to move and the bullet goes high. You may have seen that. We see it a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I don't advocate when I'm teaching people put the weight of their head. I just use it as a contact rifle. There are other people that have more head weight than others, but it's not uncommon for me if somebody could take the cheek piece off, just take it off, go through, figure out what it feels like, and then put it back on as a reference. But I touch my cheek, but I don't weight any weight on it. Nevertheless, it came from discussing those kind of point of impact shifts that we see, and then building the rifle to fit around them and their techniques to match. So if you do put your face on there, awesome. If you do a bridge, it won't matter. If you don't do a bridge, you're probably going to see it. Why were we seeing these shifts down low? And it came back to that head on the hand watching TV. So if you're not familiar with that, Frank came up with it and he talks about it in his
I
class.
could show it right here. Just move the camera to me, and I'll just say, like, I got the laptop here in a way. You can just pick it up and turn it and bring it right. But if you just go here, kids watch TV like this. and they sit here all day, every day, and they just sit and watch TV with you like this. And I can say here all day, this is comfortable, right? If I spent an hour like this, it wouldn't bother me. So that's where, when the height question came up of how high to set bipods and to set, yeah, just rotate, how high to set all this stuff, then the question was, what's the right height?
Is that lower?
Oh no, it's on you.
But then, so everybody lays down like this and they get their prone position and they get comfortable. But if you put the rifle in front of them, their rifle and their scope are really low. And so to get the rifle up, if your bipods can go up to that. But then we found that there, people are still dropping under this position, but this is the natural position that we're looking for, which we put here on the angle. Then I had the thought, one of the reasons that was struggling is people had 3/4 inch rings, or rings that, where the scope
It's
the
low, and I
bell
could bring that in
was
here,
on-
like
the bell was on
right here. Look at the height.
and these are all tall rings, right? Do you have anything that has like ultra low
No,
barrel and it's touching
that
the barrel?
hunting rifle, but it's at your house.
No, but I put tall rings on it.
Yeah,
So
this is
you
the
guys-
lowest.
No, but that's still really tall.
Yeah,
So let's come back here for a second to just keep rounding it out. And if it's live and people are saying anything, we could ask the questions. But all of these have what most people would consider tall rings. But if you're mashing your head down or getting down on the rifle to get it up and to get this position, we use the clavicle as the anchor point for the rifle. And obviously your eye has to look through the scope. So there's a height between your clavicle and your eye. And we measured that with Frank and I.
yeah.
And
Like we use the ruler and just.
and that distance that I drew on here is going to be fixed for you. But as that angle decreases, so does the distance between those. Problem is, when you're like this, there's still height to it. So you can see here, if we look at the cosine, this would be 50% of your upright standing distance in the prone. So 50% of it. But if you drop below that, it decreases very rapidly from 50 to 0 if you're completely horizontal. But then you have to crane your neck, and that creates more issues also. So if you get on your rifle and you do this, you're dropping that height between the two. Promise, it's not good to crane your neck forward. Now I have bolts in my neck, so it gets really tricky. You can see my neck and head are a little bit crooked. If I get on a rifle and do this, it's trained me because the rings are too low. How do you minimize that? Well, there's a couple ways. If I change the angle of my torso, if I hinge at the hips, the angle decreases, and I keep my head in a kind of an anatomically neutral position, I've decreased the height, but then I have to turn my head forward for my eyes to be neutral in the center of the eye. And I'm not an optometrist. I was going to talk to one soon, but I think that our eyes work best when they face forward and they're not looking through your eyebrows or looking down and left or right. You can test this. Just look at the computer with your head tilted down, and you can feel those muscles working. It changes my vision to do this, and I can feel the muscles firing. We need to take in that input from our eyes and process it so that we can respond to our rounds. And I think you can get the most input with your eyes neutral, right? I got a little bit ahead of myself. Then the idea came up to get taller and taller rings to compensate for the difference in that height, in that zone between 50 and 90%. Because standing, at least the way I stand, I hinge my hips and I kind of lean forward a little bit so I can get some recoil management. And I think that angle is about 90% of my upright. If I go to positional, it's pretty much this till I go to prone, and then it's that 50% height. If I'm going to compensate for that, I want taller rings. So we did an experiment, and even though Frank and I are much different heights, and the distance between our clavicle and our eyes is 2 inches different, the results for us were the same, and there were unexpected results that came from shooting with this taller ring experiment. But we wanted to kind of ask you guys what you thought about this and the way to compensate for it easily is to get taller rings. Now, there aren't taller rings for bolt guns because people are buying very short ones. So we got some AR risers, and we're going to show you three setups. The first one has, the center of the bore to the center of the optic is 2.5 inches. Then we've got 2.75, and then we got a 1 inch riser so that we've got 3.5 inches. I'm going to show you the torso angle, but also the head and neck and the response that I get because, I think we've all trained ourselves kind of in a Pavlovian response to put our heads down, our necks down instead of tilting our heads. I think that our bodies, though, as animals, are going to perform best in an anatomically neutral setting. If you look at athletes, everything that they want to do is built around the way that your body's built in neutral. So if we can stay closer to neutral, our body's going to work like it was supposed to. And that includes our eyes and that includes our brain. Let's take a look at these heights. And I'm going to show you, I'm going to get on these. And so this gas gun is the 2.5 inch optic to bore. And so if I'm going to get on it, I tend to go down when I index. Everybody's
I don't
going
know
to
if
have
you want the cheek up
a
or
different process. It won't matter really, but the way I do it is if I'm in a bridge, I come forward and I bridge and I make that connection. And then I look at the target, drop it in, lean forward, and then I have to put my head down. And then I'm looking through the top of my eye. If I'm going to put my eyes neutral, I'm going to have to crane my neck even more to either have my face upright so that I've got a good use of my eye in neutral. So now you're in this split compromise. I either crane my neck more and look through the bridge of my eye, or I crane my neck more so that I can look up, and then I kind of have to mash my head down. And that compromise is something that I think a lot of shooters do. Now, the tension in your neck on recoil is going to accumulate, and I think that that's going to cause strain and headaches and stress. So you connect, you come down, and then I kind of have to mash down a little bit. I tend to look through the top of my eye when I do this because I can't tilt my neck back because of the bolts. But if I did, my eye is less strained. But nevertheless, this is too low for me to maximize anatomic neutral, eye not in a stress position. And there's a couple ways that you could compensate for this. You can lower your buttstock a little bit, but that doesn't really minimize the need to crane because then you're going to start to have to push it out to the side, right? And a lot of us aren't putting a precision rifle out on the side of our shoulder and shooting at an angle anymore. And so this is kind of an issue that has to do with a modern way of shooting the rifle. So now this is going to be a 1/4 inch taller, but let's see what the difference of a 1/4 inch is. Just a 1/4 inch. Slide my chin down. I'm gonna look at the target. I'm gonna drop in, and I'll tilt my head down. It's a little bit less strain on my neck, and it's a little bit easier to see. But again, my head is still forward, and for me to have my eye in a neutral position where my ocular muscles aren't working, I've really got to lift my head in a way that if I'm going to shoot a lot, I'm going to end up with a terrible headache and crackling in my neck. I don't have much of a choice but to look through the upper half of my eye's range of motion. Now, 1.5 inch rings are pretty standard. Now, these are 1.5 inch rings on a 1 inch action, so you're at 2.5 inches. Actually, this has a riser, so it's 2 3/4. This is about as tall as it gets. And when we moved to taller rings, I'm like, wow, this is way more comfortable than the 1 inch or the lower, but still not perfect. So then we took the 1.5-inch rings and put them on a 1-inch AR riser, right? And I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna connect, I'm gonna bridge, I've bridged, I'm gonna lean forward, and I've got my eye in anatomic neutral. My head is in crane. My neck's about neutral. My face is upright. I don't feel my eye strain at all. And I feel much more comfortable just dropping in. We dropped a cheek piece so that we could both get on. So I don't have any contact with my cheek really, but we could just raise that. Nevertheless, my eyes facing forward. I have no strain on my eye. My neck's not craned down. I have contact and I'm able to engage and utilize my rifle system without pushing my neck down, craning my head, or doing anything weird with my shoulder and neck. And so, first of all, the comfort that you notice is remarkable. And even though there's a size difference between Frank and I, he said the same thing. Well, what about prone? So we got on and it was comfortable for both of us because this is shorter than that ocular distance for both of us. We just have to have a slightly different torso angle, but a torso angle is really easy to change with your hips. And in prone, the difference between Frank and I, even though we have a big difference, it's a marginal difference.
Yeah, we have a 2-inch difference standing.
Yeah, almost everybody is going to be at the same if you're at that 30-degree prone. If you mash yourself down because you have low bipods, low ring, that's where it's going to be much different. But at this angle, we're talking about um, half an inch variability between Frank and I, and we're much different when it comes to the standing angle. So I think that when it comes to scope rings, that sells itself for me. That this height, and I would even go half-inch higher, but we don't have a half-inch riser. My eye's neutral, I can see everything. My neck's not having to do much. I'm on, and it's comfortable. But then there was added unexpected results. It's anecdotal because we went out and shot. We had multiple rifles. And with the high scope rings, I've got good recoil management. But when I shoot on the shot, my reticle goes up and comes back down to the target, up, back down to the target. And I don't have footage from a trigger cam, so you're gonna have to believe me. But when I shoot, it goes and then back, and it comes back to the target. I hear people emphasize, after the shot, where did your reticle settle? It settles, in the zone that I want it to settle on. But during the shot, the reticle moves. Probably something that you've seen. With the high scope rings, my reticle didn't go up and back to center. It just kind of moved around the target and stayed neutral. My guess was when you're craning down, there's a reflex on that shot because you're already using muscles to hold your body down to have it kind of dip because you're pushing, recoils, it goes up, down. The less I was pushing and the more I was in neutral, the recoil impulse went straight back. Shoot, the reticle just moved around the target. It didn't go up, down, and settle where it was supposed to. It just kind of danced around the target. So I shot 400 yards, 500 yards, 600, 800, 1,000, all of them. It danced around the plate, but my field of view wasn't disturbed because I wasn't looking through the roof of my eye or through my eyebrows. And I watched the 308 hit, bang. I watched the 308 hit, bang. So when people talk about seeing the bullet hit the plate, if you're straining your eyes and it moves and you're trying to keep an idea of what's going on plate, for me, it was the same thing. Like, okay, I see it. If I see a mark, great, but I didn't watch it hit the plate. Adding a 1-inch riser, I watched the bullet hit the plate because my reticle and my sight picture wasn't disturbed. And I think that's because my eye was in neutral and the sight picture wasn't so much that my eyes were straining and it moved up and down. The target stayed in the center. It moved around it, but I never lost focus on the target while I was shooting. I think that's significant in a couple ways. My body wasn't strained, my eyes weren't strained, and the recoil impulse had the target dance in the center, and I never lost focus on the target through the shot, which allowed the bullet to be detected on its impact and see what happened. Now we have footage of me shooting from the side, and I was pretty surprised. I think it has something to do with the scope height, the angle, not craning my neck, not pushing down on the back of the rifle, and having my eye and head in a more neutral position, which comes from this scope height. I don't know if you can tell on the video, but we'll look later. But if I'm going to mount on this, I'm going to connect and look at the target. I'm going to lower my body, and I've got a sight picture. So my eye and my head is neutral, and I have no kind of extra craning that's required to see this. Now on the recoil impulse, the rifle stayed on target, so I didn't have my sight picture disturbed. You might shoot and see the target, but your focus is going to change. That didn't happen. On these, this is 1 inch less. I'm going to mount just the same. Get on. I'm going to drop the angle. I've got to have a harder angle. And you can see, I know I won't be able to see through this. So now I have to drop either my head or crane my neck and my head to see through. And that either adds tension to my neck, the occipital lobe to tilt my head back, or I'm looking through my eyebrows. And with that ocular tension, I think even with that, I'm going to lose focus because I can tell my eyes are strained looking through the scope. And that's just the difference of 1 inch. My guess is if I added another ½ inch, that would be my Goldilocks zone. But it's so much more comfortable. And I remember feeling like when we went to 1.5 inches, it was so much more comfortable than 1 inch. And I can remember having 3/4 inch rings and mashing my head down and struggling with some consistency. So I think there's something to this. I don't believe in having the scope as close to the rifle bore as possible. I think that's old information that doesn't apply to the style of shooting that we do. We're not shooting these.
We're not picking the
at
rifle
10
up to our
feet.
face.
Yeah, we're not, and we're not doing. We don't have to worry about offset at 10 feet. Yeah, I'm sure there's somebody that shot somebody with a bolt gun at 10 feet because they had to, and
It's your 1,200-yard dope.
and it hit,
We did
2
we
inches
did
lower
we
than
did an 11-foot shot at Sniper's Hide Cup on a ½ inch dot. It's your 1,200-yard dope.
man.
Oh, 11-foot. We did 11-foot shot. We did 11 because they did it in a trailer as a sniper shot. There was a hostage in a trailer. The team was stacked in. The sniper came in. He was 11 feet from the guy, and he was on somebody's shoulder, and he popped the guy from 11 feet. So we recreated that in a stage. What we did is we went in the carbine pit at Rifles Only. We put a paper target up for everybody with the dot, and then pulled up to it from the 11, like right, you're at 11 feet is your shooting spot. Behind you, we had a cop car with all the lights on and the sirens and the whole thing going off. And you had to do a 1 shot at 11 foot on a piece of paper.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Man, but cognitively, you have to know what you're going to do. So that's how comfortable are you with your system? How comfortable and familiar are you with the ins and outs of close, height over bore? Can you do it? That's a test of somebody
Yeah.
that's got a diverse.
When you went to Rifles Only, did you ever shoot straight down off the tower?
No, but we shot. I
That's a 700-yard shot. So they put paper at the bottom of the tower. You go over the railing and you shoot straight down. You put your 700-yard dope on to hit the paper at the bottom of this Rifles Only tower.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I think But I think stuff like that, while it's different than what we see at competitions, it takes from real world scenarios and
Right.
says, look, if you're gonna have to do this, you're gonna have to do it quick, and you're gonna have to be familiar with
Well, the Miami cop who shot through the computer, he messed his mechanical offset up. He still killed the guy because it was a computer screen, an old one, and it went right through the computer because they were in the bank. It was the bank guy.
Mhm. I
And
remember when they did that.
right,
Yeah.
he missed his mechanical offset, but got lucky and went through the computer. But he didn't dial his mechanical offset. He just held on the guy and went through the computer, which is a typical cop move. They don't do their mechanical offset.
Right.
But he should have had dope on his gun because he was inside 100 yards.
Yeah.
And so, but he didn't. Just in his case, this close.
Right. Like, yeah, if you enter the tee box and go through the mouth, you better hope it hits the
It's fine. Yeah.
instead of sending teeth everywhere.
Mhm.
I'm a bad guy.
So that's kind of where that stuff goes. But for sure, man, this is
We're talking about less than 1% of the shots that most people are taking, but it's easy to forget there are things we can do to be more comfortable. And when we're more comfortable, we can think better, we can respond better. But in this case,
you stay sharper longer.
and yeah, right, because it's like using a suppressor. It's like, oh my gosh, I don't have a headache. I don't feel the overpressure. A whole class of suppressed shooters at the end of the day versus a whole class of unsuppressed shooters, I feel 100 times better. You're not getting blasted over and over again all day by other shooters. You take that and then you take your neck strain, and if you get a headache, but I didn't expect the recoil impulse to be changed as significantly as this was. And it's just, it's a 308, so it's got some recoil, but being able to watch it hit the plate without any disturbance to my visual field kind of caused us to bring that back up and say, hey, let's have a live chat, and I'll monologue for a little bit and then open it up for conversation. I think it's significant. I don't believe in having your scope at the level of the bore. I'm going to try to figure out what that measurement is using this angle chart. But right now I'm thinking this is 2.5 inches, right? No, it ends up being 3.5 inches because we have the action, the 1 inch riser, and then the 1.5 inch mount. So 3.5 inches. I would even go with 4 inches because I do tilt a little bit, but we got to see if that 4 inches fits for smaller shooters.
Well, it might be a case of a height where we can go, you're up to 5'4", you're going to go, 3 3/4. You're 5'4" to 5'8", you're going to go 4. And then if you're 5'8" or taller, maybe because there is a difference in your shoulder to head. But
because of this angle, that difference isn't as big as
right.
Because between you and I,
but it did fit. It fit me fine at 4 inches or 3.5 where you are.
And some people might be thinking prone, so I'm gonna pop this out of here. What you want is to have the barrel right higher off the ground so that the scope ends up at your eye height when you're in that prone kid on the floor position. And to do that, you can't have tiny bipods, because if your bipods can't lift the barrel to the height that's required, which in this case is 3.5 inches lower than your eye. So if you get on the floor and you measure how high is my eye off the ground, you need to bring the barrel up to the difference of your optic,
Right.
which means bipods are going to be taller. But with taller bipods, so what? You just make them taller, and most people aren't.
Well, even with our cheeks going that high, you have more than enough cheek piece to reach that. So that's the other thing, is we're dropping so low on these cheeks that the way they are, that you could even see this is set up and it dropped low. I don't know if Chris dropped it a little bit, but we got a lot of space. There's a ton. You know what I mean? You have a lot of height with these to rest your head and not push. And like Chris says, if you're pushing on the cheek piece, you're pushing the rifle over at the same time you're pulling the bolt to the side. And that's where canting comes from.
It's not only canting, but if you're pushing down on the back and it recoils.
Right. And we've seen the recoil impulse. One of the things, like looking at how different people use game changers, we were looking at the recoil pulse of people in the different points and corners of a game changer, and we saw down recoil.
Well, here's the thing. if you're shooting prone, do you ever have to re-squeeze the bag and refit it shot to shot? Because if that's the case, you're mashing it down each shot and it's losing ground, so you're having to squeeze it back up. If you're doing that, that's what's happening. If you're pushing down too hard, it's mashing down, you're squeezing it back up, mashing it down, squeezing it back up. If you're shooting prone and you're doing it right, it shouldn't move at all. You should be able to shoot, 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 and you don't have to readjust your bag. If you readjust your bag, it's moving on recoil. You're not managing the recoil and you're pushing down too hard. That is what's happening there.
Right,
So
right.
if you're used to re-squishing your bag when you're shooting, you're pushing down too hard and relying on the bag rather than your torso for a bridge. And it's going to happen more and more the lower the scope gets because you're pushing down. And when you're pushing down really hard and it recoils, your body's not going to just relax like a marshmallow. If it's already acting, you're gonna flinch.
I'll take this video and it's in the high TV, but I'm gonna put it into the forum and I'll do a quick discussion. And I have some of the photographs we took, so I can put that in and I'll make a post with it so people can reference this and then look at the pictures too and go in one place, because I can drop it in really easy.
But I feel like most shooters have an opinion, and those opinions vary wildly. So I thought it'd be fun, like if people are thinking, man, that's not what this is what I do, and whatever the rationale is, I would love to hear counter arguments.
Right. Well, and the only counter is can't. Can't is the only negative to a high scope.
But I think that the MDT video did a great job showing that it's not going to do much, and they had like a 3-foot scope mount. If it's vertical, it's going to stay vertical. If you're mashing and you run the bolt and you do stuff, you could cant the rifle anyway. But if it's upright, it's upright.
Right. And all the levels are so sensitive now with the electronics.
Yeah.
You're getting it to the nth degree.
And the rifle angle is still going to be the rifle angle. I guess I don't understand that too much, but you could pull it off center. And if you've got a heavy bolt, you could tilt it. Or like you said, like if people are looking at a card or looking at a level, they're gonna
follow it, right?
Follow it with their eye, and if your eye's strained, you might tilt it. I mean, there's a lot of reasons that people do things to screw up.
Right.
I think this is gonna be the way to go. I've got more risers coming, so I'm gonna outfit all my rifles with risers. And
I have risers. I've ordered 2 as well. So
yeah, you won't see me shooting this year without these risers because I want to test it all. Even my carbines, I'm gonna have big risers so that.
And the carbine world's already going to super high risers.
Yeah,
they're already doing that.
If you're gonna box somebody, you're not gonna be like, all right, let's fight.
Like,
you can't see or respond if you're like this. Like, come on, let's fight.
Right.
Like put a neck, tie your head up into some awkward position and wrestle somebody. You still might win if you're big and strong and know what you're doing, but you won't be as effective as if you're able to respond evenly everywhere. We'll see. But
no, this is perfect.
This is awesome.
Yeah, we'll wrap it up. We'll talk about it more, but we wanted to give you this live to discuss. We're going to put it in the forum and we'll make a discussion. This is day 1. Think of this as day 1 of us.
Of the discussion.
Yeah, of the discussion on taller rings and high risers there. So cool.
If you guys want to send an email, Chris@riflecraft.com, RIFLEKRAFT, Chris@sniperside.com. Send us a message on Facebook, Instagram. Reach out to Frank. Reach out to me if you have questions, comments, emails. I'm not going to give my phone number out on a public video, but I think both of us want to keep.
Well, you have the mentor. They can reach you in the mentorship on high TV, and they could use the forum too. Yeah.
I think that it would be cool to have the conversation to see why there aren't taller mounts being used and what the advantages are if people are trying this stuff. I don't know if these cheap aluminum AR risers.
How great they are.
The abuse. But that's an easy fix. We get a good company to make some if there's an issue. But if there's an issue, we'll find out. Because I'm gonna do it. Like everything I do this year is gonna have either 1 inch or higher if I can get more to try to get that 4 inches instead of 3.5 inches.
If you go up on the spur, you can do 1 inch on that and go up higher on the spur because that spur is not a 1.5.
I think they make 1.8.
Yeah, I think they do as well.
But I'm gonna try to get up pretty high. The ASXR has the extra quarter
Mhm.
inch.
The rail, the top rail.
But
Cool.
yeah, finding that, considering the angle, considering the zone that we shoot in.